Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us this evening is Mr. Kelly Beatty. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Good to have you on the show. And the subject, as you can probably see if you look at your TV monitor, you had the camera on it a minute ago, is going to be lighting, all right? So Kelly is a longtime Chelmsford citizen, and he will be presenting an article at the Springtown meeting. It's Article 29, and it's going to address lighting issues in Chelmsford. And Kelly, before we get into the conversation, what we like to do with our new folks that haven't been on the show before is to ask you to just give us a very brief biographical sketch, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Sure. Well, I was originally from California, and thank you very much for this lovely winter you're providing for me. 40 years ago, my wife and I moved to Chelmsford. I spent my whole career working for an astronomy magazine based in Cambridge called Sky and Telescope. That's what lured me out from California. I retired 7 years ago, and I'm so busy doing stuff, as retirees can sometimes be, that I wonder how I ever had time for a full-time job.
My father used to say that all the time. I remember when he retired, and he was just busier than the proverbial one-armed paper hanger, and I said to him, he said, I'm going to have to go back and get a full-time job, so I'll have some spare time to do things in.
That's right.
Right?
and one of my passions has long been, because of my background in astronomy, is preserving the night sky, fighting light pollution, locally, statewide, nationally, internationally, through an organization called Dark Sky International. And I was on their board of directors for about a decade, and I'm active locally in the local chapter.
Yes, and so I'm glad we have that little biographical sketch of you, because now I understand even more why you're so passionate about this particular subject. It makes perfect sense. The one thing you left out of your biography was your work with the Chelmsford Telemedia.
Well, that's right, and that also got started. It's an interesting story for another time, but I sort of stumbled onto Matt Scott, and soon became involved in working with him on documentaries. I do a lot of public speaking, so I'm not afraid of a camera, and I eventually chaired the board of Chelmsford Telemedia for 2 decades, and retired from that, and it's in good hands.
And you're still the voice of town meeting, however.
I am, and the 4th of July.
And the 4th of July, that's correct. So you haven't completely disengaged, and we're grateful for your continuing contribution. So
thank you.
Tonight's subject will be the warrant article that you have proposed by way of citizen petition, which is a mechanism where any citizen who wants to bring forth something for legislative consideration by our town meeting can do that on his own initiative. All you have to do is get 10 signatures, voter signatures, and you can get your article on the warrant, which you've done. So we'll be talking tonight about Article 29, which is, and I'll read right from the preface of the article, to see if the town will vote to adopt a general bylaw in the following form to be inserted as Chapter 108 of the Town Code, and then it goes on and on and on to address the subject of outdoor lighting. So I am going to stop talking. I'm going to let you take it from here, and I'll probably interrupt and ask a question or two, but why don't you begin the conversation?
Sure. Well, let's start by saying this is an update of an existing bylaw in the town. Way back in 2000, Bob Morse and I wrote a bylaw. It was a zoning bylaw. He was on the planning board at that time, which was, in those days, we were one of the few towns with an outdoor lighting bylaw. And the premise was pretty simple, which is if you have a light outdoors above a certain brightness, then that light has to be controlled. And it was to be controlled by basically saying it must point down. All the light must be below horizontal. That was the essence of that bylaw. It had a few exemptions for public safety and temporary road work and things like that. Well, in the past, in the past 25 years, we have learned a lot about outdoor lighting, and there's 2 things I want to just use as an example for that. The first is what we call glare. And glare, we're all familiar with it. When you see it with like bright headlights coming at you down the roadway, or a security light that's shining in your face. We now realize that glare can be not just distracting, but disabling in the wrong situations. And so public safety people will tell you this, and you know just inherently that if a light is shining in your face, it's harder to see, just like we're here under these lights, it's harder to see what's going on in the shadows. Whereas if that light is shining down on the target area, it's a lot easier to make out what's going on.
And the goal is to light the target area,
Right.
not the adjacent properties.
Not the adjacent properties,
Right.
and not your, glare almost
right.
by definition has to be coming at you more or less horizontally, okay? That's number one. And number two is an appreciation for how destructive the blue part of light, the blue wavelengths, are in the nighttime environment. It's great during the day, blue sky, it keeps you awake, all that, but at night, blue is bad in so many ways. It creates the most sky glow. It disrupts nocturnal ecology. It disrupts our circadian rhythm. You've probably heard about, like, don't read your phone late at night because the blue light
Right,
from it
right.
it messes up your day-night cycle. And blue light has been shown in great quantities for those people who are unlucky enough to have to work overnight or shift work, emergency room nurses and so forth, increases your risk of certain types of cancers. So there's a lot of reasons to be afraid of blue light at night. And unfortunately, in those 25 years, the great technology that's emerged is LED lighting. And unlike a lot of the lighting that we used to have, think incandescent lighting, which has a kind of warm color to it, LEDs have a lot of blue light in them inherently. So it's trying to rein in those two things, the blue light from LEDs and the glare, that has prompted me to come forward.
Okay.
One of the things that's happened is LEDs are so efficient. You can do now with 7 watts or 8 watts what you used to be able to do with 60 or 70 or even 100 watts.
And if I remember, that was not the case when they first came on the market. I mean, you did not get the same light output.
We actually, remember the little compact fluorescents, the little
Yes.
squirrely things?
Oh, I still have one up in my
Right. So that was the first wave of really efficient lighting. And what happened was that people took that 60-watt incandescent bulb that was on their porch, and they were now, for 10 watts of LED, they can get like the equivalent of a 100-watt bulb.
Yes.
Well, why wouldn't I want more light? And so there's been what you might call lumen creep over the last few years, where
We all know what scope creep is, so that's, okay, I like that.
Our nighttime environment has just
Lumen
gotten
creep.
brighter, and
Yeah.
also, it must be said that we've become a 24/7 society.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, and people should be clear, I am not advocating for no light, but the right light. And so that's what I came forward with. Through all my work with Dark Sky, I consulted 2 outdoor lighting professionals. I contacted every stakeholder in town. The Chelmsford Business Association, we've had multiple meetings. How will this play out? And the biggest reasons that I went after a general bylaw instead of a zoning bylaw like the original one was, is that a general bylaw allows you to declare everything that's bad can be non-conforming. There's no grandfathering. I can say, if you've got a bad light, it's not conforming now. Now, what I've done is I've put in what's called a sunset clause, which gives people, after this, assuming it gets enacted, you have 10 years to change out your bad light to a good light.
That's almost equivalent to a grandfather situation when you think about it.
Because over that period of time, a lot of people are going to be changing their lights anyway.
Exactly.
The second reason for a general bylaw is that it has broader reach. In a zoning bylaw, the town itself is kind of exempt, right? The utility companies are exempt. And anyone who's gone down Chelmsford Street and seen all of these crazy square floodlights on the top of the utility poles, those are owned by the utility.
Right.
And they're horrible. And so this gives, a general bylaw gives a mechanism for casting a wider net over a lot of the really egregiously bad lighting in town. And I have to say that even though we've had this bylaw in place for a quarter of a century, it has not been
Enforced.
or people don't know it, or they've ignored it, or
Right.
whatever. There's really a lot of bad lighting in town.
Yes,
And
I
so
know.
and so and so that's the goal,
Yep.
to try to rein some of that in. There are a lot of towns who have outdoor lighting ordinances now. They tend to be smaller towns because they like to keep the quality of life that they've got, this sort of quasi-rural time and ambiance. And Chelmsford is no different, but a lot of these bylaws have no teeth in them in terms of enforcement. The existing bylaw, like most, are what are called complaint-driven. In other words, there's nobody out there's no lighting police going around trying to figure out whether your light conforms or not. But if somebody complains, then the building commissioner is obliged to deal with it. And so what we do in this draft is...
But under the, now correct me if I'm wrong, under the existing zoning bylaw, if that situation occurs, the inspector goes out and he can declare by visual inspection that too much light is bleeding onto the adjacent property, but he can't cite 5 specific things that you're in violation of, like you've got too much whatever, okay? Is that a fair statement?
You know, the existing bylaw really has nothing in terms of it says you can't have so much light as to have it overspill, but it's undefined.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
And
There's
so-
no
and-
definition of what is too
Right.
much light.
So the new bylaw does that.
Right.
It's measured in a something called foot candles.
Okay.
And, you know, this is going to be new for a lot of town meeting reps to come to grips with it. But this is a light meter that controls foot candles. I press a button and it tells me,
How many foot candles?
it says that there are 18.2 foot candles hitting that little thing. That's all it takes to make that measurement at the property line. And anybody, the building commissioner or whoever is chosen to be the enforcer, will be able to make the determination quantitatively that quickly.
That doesn't sound like a bad thing to me, but, you know.
Well, and I have to say, this will be a little worrisome for town meeting reps, and some people may be scared of them because it's got numbers in it. And we've all seen complicated zoning bylaws come before town meeting with a lot of numbers and setbacks and stuff like that. This is no different in that sense. If we think about like building a house or something like that, there's a building code that's really complex that has to be followed. And every day, we don't see that because that's between the contractors and the state, regs and all of the building inspectors and so forth. So this is one of those cases where we're going to be bringing forward a technical requirement for lighting in town and to try to, apart from the numbers of it, to people know when lighting is good and lighting is bad. And they also know that in many cases there are situations when you're being, assaulted, but really by the lighting of a neighbor or something like that, and you wish you had some recourse. And we're trying to find a way to help with that.
And of course, you appeared before the planning board last night, and you went over the basics of what you were trying to do with them. And the conversation, I thought, was, pardon the pun, folks, illuminating. Okay. I mean, I know I'm really pretty ignorant on this particular subject, so I learned a few things from watching the meeting last night. And I walked away with the thought, well, if the new law is more specific in terms of the enforcement parameters, okay, then that takes the subjectivity out of the enforcement aspect.
That's right. That's right.
And limits the discretion of whoever the enforcement officer is, which to me would ultimately, if it got into a legal issue, would actually limit the liability of the town.
Right.
Okay. So we can't argue that a subjective decision was made or the guy's picking on me because he doesn't like the way I part my hair. You either meet the spec or you don't.
Right.
That's the way I was looking at it.
Right. And that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And so that's the plan. It's new and it's going to be, I think a lot of people really don't think much about lighting. I know a lot of people have the desire and the right to illuminate their property or their businesses, to keep those safe, and I wouldn't dare take that away from
Of course
them.
not.
But in a sense, your right stops at the property line, and if you've got,
It's like any other encroachment. Right.
think about your typical household or business security light. It's plastered up on the wall, and it basically points out sideways. Now, there are physical reasons why I can tell you that one light on the side of your house is not going to effectively illuminate your half-acre lot or whatever you might have. But what it is going to do is that light doesn't stop just because there's a property line. It's going to shine into whatever the rooms are next door.
And as we talked a little bit off camera, I actually have that problem. So my property abuts the Summer Street, little Summer Street Plaza there. And it's about 140 feet from my property, from my house to the property line, okay? So they have one of these, or maybe more, I think it's more, the wall-mounted lights that point out.
Right.
So that...
Ostensibly to illuminate that little service area behind the building.
And I guess it does, although, but even with my limited lighting knowledge, I think I could, with almost no knowledge, I think I could come up with a better lighting situation that would illuminate more of their parking lot.
Right.
But that, having said that, the problem is that wall-mounted light shines directly into my bedroom.
Right.
And in the wintertime, it's not a problem because we've got the shade down because we're trying to save heat, okay? But in the summertime, window goes up,
Right.
shades up,
Right.
and we get that light. And it's
And-
very, very difficult situation.
And Sam, I'm here to tell you that you're in luck, because the existing bylaw has a clause in it that if you change more than 25% of your businesses or your home's physical footprint, or especially the outdoor lighting fixtures, then you're obliged to change them all to be conforming. And in the case of the Summer Street Mall, they very recently put in new lights in the main parking area that is in front along Summer Street, you might know, and they're really good lights. They're really good lights, but they didn't change the ones in the back. But you can now go to, I encourage you to go to the building commissioner and say, according to the existing bylaw, they're obliged to change out all of the lights in the back, and that's your successful strategy there.
And I'm going to guess they don't know. I mean, I'm just going to make that assumption because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt unless I have absolute proof to the contrary. So that's fine. I think that's going to be a simple conversation.
Right.
And thank you very much. I'm looking forward to doing that, and I will. So I don't know, we talked a little about, you brought some visual aids with you.
I did.
Whether, you might want to try, don't know if it's going to show up on the camera
Well,
or
it tends to not show up on video as well.
Okay, so you can talk us through it.
One of the things that is new is the notion of gauging the color of a light bulb using something called color temperature. And the way I would explain this is, you know that a candle flame is yellow and a gas flame is blue.
Right.
And the gas flame is much hotter than the candle flame, and so it's also bluer. And so unlike what we think of as hot and cold, the bluer a light source, the hotter its color temperature. And I have here two identical LED bulbs. One has a color temperature of 4,000 Kelvin, that's the measurement unit, and the other is 2,700.
Same wattage?
Same wattage.
Okay.
And not only just same wattage, but same output, same amount of light generated, what are called lumens.
Lumens, right.
All right, and so I'm going to turn these on, and
wow,
you can, I don't know if the camera can
I don't know
make
if the
it
camera
out,
can see it.
but this is the 4,000 Kelvin.
That's obnoxious, Kelly.
It is obnoxious.
That's obnoxious.
And I'll tell you why in multiple ways, and this is the 2,700. So the bylaw I am proposing would require that new installations of lights be at 2,700 Kelvin or less.
Okay.
During the daytime, our vision is in our eyes.
And the intensity of the light
It's the
itself is the same, right?
It's the same amount, but this looks brighter.
Yes.
For this reason. I'll cut to the quick. Your eyes, both during the day and especially at night, are more sensitive to blue light than they are to, I'll call it yellow light, for lack of a better word here. And so even though these are the same intensity in terms of the lumens, your eye perceives this to be brighter. And so this gets back to the idea, this realization that LEDs put out a lot of blue light. So there's a lot of squinting going on at night.
Yes.
Because of that. And so that's one of the new things, the new numbers that are that's in my proposed bylaw. I'm trying to rein in these in favor of these. I'm going to turn them off now because I know it's hurting your eyes just looking at it.
But it is.
And it might not come across on TV, so the one on the left for you is bluer, and this one is a little bit, but it's very obvious by eye.
It's very obvious, and again, off camera, we were talking a little about this, and I brought up the, as an analogy, is the LED headlights.
Yes.
When you're on the road and the car is coming at you, and they are absolutely blinding, and Kelly said, well, that's because of what we're talking about right now.
Right.
And it's the way, so what I didn't get from the meeting last night, because you didn't really go into it, was it's not just the light, it's the way your eye receives that, okay?
Yeah.
And that's the effect. So.
And there's another thing I want to point out, which is Chelmsford, like a lot of places, has a generally aging population, and this harsh light, the glare part that I've been talking about, becomes more problematic with age. Our eyes start to let us down.
Oh, yes.
They get cloudy. We get cataracts and stuff like that. There's a lot more scattering that goes on inside the eye. And guess what, Sam? Guess which color causes the most scattering? I'm
going to take a wild stab in the dark, no pun intended, blue.
You're right. You're absolutely right. For the same reason, in a kind of way, that the skies are the daytime sky is blue. The most scattering by like a huge factor is from blue light. And so if we can control the amount of blue light in our nighttime environment, regardless of how bright it is, we're already one step in the right direction. And so there are a lot of environmental reasons to be doing this. I like to think of Chelmsford as a town that values its approach to like open space and maintaining the character of the town.
Oh, absolutely, it does.
And we don't like to be seen as I'm trying to think of the right word here, just a big ugly aggregation of businesses and such. We have
development, when you get development issues in Chelmsford, they are always very carefully considered with a viewpoint toward minimizing impact on the existing environment.
Right. And so, and this goes back to the conversations I've been having with Kirk Marshall and the CBA, the Chelmsford Business Association.
And are they supportive of
this?
They're
very supportive.
Now that's important. Okay.
I'm not sure that they're going to stand up at the town meeting. Kirk, if you're watching, please do, and say, we support it. But they have been very sympathetic to what I'm trying to do. And the thing is, already the planning board for years has been stealthily doing this good work for all of us. Whenever a new development comes in, the planning board now requires them to submit a lighting plan.
Yes.
So, and you will notice that new buildings, new developments that come into town have to have this, not just what's called for by the bylaw, but actual, really good standards. And I'll give you an example, a really good example of this. When Stanley took over Chelmsford Plaza,
yes,
and redeveloped that, they were going to reuse the existing poles that were there. And I looked at the spec for that, and I saw that they were planning to put in these pretty good lights, but they were 4,000 Kelvin, these bluish ones. And I contacted Adam Winstanley, and I said, would you consider, I know that they make a 3,000 Kelvin, a warmer equivalent, would you consider putting that in? And he said, well, I'll get my architect on. Time goes by, don't have any further interaction, the lights go in, they get turned on, they're beautiful lights. Folks, if you want to see what really good quality area lighting looks like, they did not only that, I mean now Summer Street and Chelmsford Plaza are both very good, okay? And I got back in touch with him and I said, I got to thank you for choosing this path. And he says, no, I got to thank you. We like the look. In fact, I went back to the manufacturer, Adam told me, I went back to the manufacturer and I got them tuned down to 2,700 Kelvin. That's the warm one here. And he said, we like the look of that so much that I'm going to retrofit all of my properties.
Wow.
And so,
There's an endorsement.
well, I think what it tells me, and it should tell everyone watching, is that people like the appearance of good lighting. They don't like glare. They don't like harsh blue lights. And that's all I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm trying to sort of rein Chelmsford back into to the quality lighting that our town deserves.
Well, and I think that's the right approach. I do, and I absolutely agree with you. And I never really thought about it until we just had the explanation from you. Really, it's the glare that you find is so objectionable. And I think when you look at it from that standpoint, it's very clear. So we've got about 4 minutes. So what are the next steps? What happened? You went to the planning board last night. Are you going to appear before the finance committee?
You know, I don't know. One of the things that evolved along, this started out to be a citizens petition, but the planning board is co-sponsoring this with me.
Yep.
I know that citizen petitions often have a very difficult time at town meeting.
Yeah, I would, if you can do it and work it out with the chairman, Jim Clancy, I would recommend that you come before the FinCom
Okay.
and give us an explanation, because that's just another outlet for people to be aware of what's going on.
Right, and of course, the select board will also weigh in.
Correct.
At some point. And, you know, what I have done, Sam, is I've gone to great lengths to touch all the stakeholders in this. I mentioned the CBA. I've been at the Conservation
Well, you've been doing this a
Commission.
long time.
I have.
Yes.
I went to the Conservation Commission. I went to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Committee. I went to the Historic District Commission. I mean, the Energy and Sustainability Committee. I've touched all those bases. If nothing else, to let them know that this is coming. Obviously, I solicit their endorsement and support. And it's been a good exercise for me. I've listened and I've paid attention.
And as they say, things move at the speed of government. So,
Well, that's right.
so here we are. So once you get through that process, and if you do, and I strongly urge that you appear before the FinCom. So the next step is to actually get up at town meeting, and when it comes time for the warrant. So are you going to be the presenter?
I will be the presenter.
All right.
But I'm going to tell you, Sam, I have a secret. I have a secret ally here.
Well, maybe we shouldn't talk about it if it's.
Well, she might not show up at town meeting, so I'll
okay.
just. I mentioned that I have consulted 2 lighting professionals.
Oh,
It turns out that one of those lighting professionals, I won't mention her name, but she lives in Chelmsford.
okay, even better.
She lives in Chelmsford. She works for an enormous lighting company called Signify, and her job is policies and regulations. And so she,
Folks, you can't make this stuff up, okay?
and so she has been through it, and she's really thrilled that, because I have to tell you, there are really a lot of bad outdoor lighting ordinances out there.
I'm sure there are.
Some of them they go through overreach, or they're too vague, and we're looking for a balance here that will be gentle but firm at the same time.
And I think that's good. And again, as a result of your interaction with the planning board last night, it appears, again, having a little discussion with you off camera, it appears that you may be making some adjustments to the warrant article as printed, some amendments based on feedback that you received from them. So that's good.
Stay tuned.
So stay tuned, and that's not a complicated process. And when you get to that point, you probably want to sit down with the town moderator and make sure that he's plugged into that process as well. So.
And you know, whatever happens to this bylaw, whether it passes or not, if this doesn't pass, then the old one will remain in effect. And I would just encourage everyone who's watching this program to give some thought to the lighting that they have at their home, at their business, and you know, to imagine what better lighting might be.
And people are reasonable, and so good luck, Kelly. I think we're out of time. Thank you very much for sharing.
It's been a pleasure, Sam.
Yes,
Thank you.
More information is better than no information. So that's a wrap. Very good. Nice job.
Okay, thank you.